Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Game Friday, October 21st, 2016. Game Friday brings but one thing, and that is Gaming indeed. Hell yeah. All right, guys, let's jump right into VR and just talk some Preamble Lethal VR, the latest title from Three Fields Entertainment. They are an indie company made up of former Criterion employees. It will be coming out HTC Vive November 8th, PlayStation VR Holiday 2016, so sometime second half of December likely. Take a look, I've got the link here. Looks pretty decent, but beyond the screenshots, haven't had a chance to look too far into it. Next up, Lost. Now this was a title that originally premiered on the Oculus Rift. It's coming to the Gear VR, but it's coming as a repurposed Gear 360 video rather than a full PC experience. And finally, this one caught my interest, Vendetta Online. Billed as the most ambitious space shooter on Gear VR so far. It's an MMO RPG with cross-platform play between PC, Mac, Linux, and Gear VR. So definitely going to look into that some more. Mobile devices as well, whether it's like Elite Dangerous style or EVE Online, I'm not sure, but definitely going to look into that, find out a bit more about it. This is actually the first I've heard of this. That's Vendetta Online. All right, news-wise, HTC Vive VR headsets sales numbers revealed. So we finally have concrete sales numbers. And you would think I might be disappointed with these numbers, but I'm not. So the official numbers, and HTC co-founder and chairperson Chair Wang has, stated that these are, in fact, actual numbers. 140,000 HTC Vive units worldwide. Now we can look at that a couple of different ways. It is the most expensive solution. 140,000 HTC Vive units, probably if you're thinking about the same number or slightly more Oculus Rift units, you'd have a number combined of almost 500,000 units, which isn't bad at all. 6 months, 7 months now really into this. Again, I'm going to use the example of Sony PlayStation, 18 months to get its first million units. I think we've got some momentum now. We've got Sony PlayStation VR. There's a news piece dealing with some Google search results that are really interesting. We've got some momentum. We've got other news pieces that I'll talk about today, revealing some upcoming titles that I think are going to all launch around this upcoming holiday season. And I think that's going to do a lot to spur those sales numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if we come out of the year with 250,000 each and have a solid 500,000 going into 2017, not including obviously Sony PlayStation, which hopefully is at 500,000 to 1 million plus itself by the end of this calendar year. Next news piece, STRY VR, STRI VR, has introduced, now the CEO, Derek Belch, he's a former Stanford Cardinal kicker. He took a VR class in 2007 and basically saw all kinds of potential for sports teams, did his research, did the groundwork, and now works with a lot of pro teams, Dallas Cowboys for football, obviously, Arizona Cardinals baseball, and New York Rangers hockey. And what he does is brings the 360 action via the HMD to the players. They can analyze plays with HMD and the advantage of 360 to give that on-the-field feeling. So rather than sitting classroom style, as has been the tradition and is for a lot of other teams, instead they do this with the HMD and have that, like I said, 360 feeling of being on the field. I can really see that working, hockey and football specifically, analyzing plays as if you were on the ice or on the field for a game that travels, north-south, right? Absolutely. For baseball, I'm not so sure how applicable that would be, but Obviously, there's some benefits there, or they wouldn't be using it. But definitely end zone type sports, I can really see an advantage there. So that's STRY VR. I'm going to try to find out a little bit more about that. If he looked into that, or he did the class in 2007, it's really only the last few years he's had the HMDs to do the work with, at least commercial units, right? There were obviously prototypes floating around. We know Palmer Luckey had a wide array of them. All right, next up, PlayStation VR search interest blows past the Rift and Vive amid the launch. Now, there should be a graphic up here. What that shows is around the launch dates specifically, Sony PlayStation VR has had the most Google activity. What this also shows, though, is pre-launch for Oculus Rift. They actually had the highest peak, so higher than Sony PlayStation VR, specifically pre-launch, though. When it comes to actual launch searches, the Sony PlayStation VR comes out ahead in first place. Now, this doesn't necessarily correlate with sales, but it is interesting to see the marketing hype, just some of the searching commotion around those units centering around the launch days. Next up, Microsoft firing shots at Sony, and definitely some direct jabs regarding their Scorpio console. Now, this one is really interesting. This one caught my attention immediately because if you look past the usual, which is the 4K gaming, the we do X number of teraflops, they have some specific quotes that caught my interest. One specifically talking about high fidelity VR. Now, Project Scorpio is obviously Microsoft Xbox One's enhanced console, kind of like the PS4 Pro. We know it's more powerful. What we didn't know specifically, even though we've had some hints, and a big hint for that was Fallout 4 VR, which we were told was going to come out for Xbox. Well, now it's kind of come full circle. We can pretty much say there's going to be some virtual reality solution for Scorpio, but what is it going to be? Is it going to be Oculus Rift? I mean, we know they had a relationship with Oculus, supplying the Xbox One game pads for Oculus Rift units, right? So that's pretty much 250,000 Xbox Ones that were sold through the Oculus Rift or HTC Vive. And that's going to be interesting. You could look at it from that point of view. Suddenly you leapfrog Sony PlayStation. You have a device. To say high fidelity, it's likely going to be one of those two, either the Vive or the Rift. I mean, there is no other alternative, and they've already come out and said they won't be developing anything themselves as Microsoft. So do they go with the Rift or do they go with the Vive? Both of those higher resolution than Sony PlayStation VR, arguably more advanced units. Well, I don't think there's really an argument to the contrary. They are the more powerful units compared to the Sony PlayStation VR. So it'll be interesting to see which of the two they end up going with. My money personally is on Rift just because they have an existing relationship, but could very well be HTC Vive. So that is one I'm going to pay very close attention to over the next few weeks and months. Next up, HTC has stated they are working with more than 30 teams on Vive content that we will see very shortly. They didn't specify the holiday season, but very shortly to me, based on the calendar, would be exactly that, the holiday season. That some of those are going to be AAA studios, although they wouldn't specify which. So we're likely going to see a mix of games, VR experiences coming out for the holidays, which is perfect timing. It's a push that, I've long said both are likely going to do around the holiday season to not only push the numbers, but push new games coming out around that time. And that'll be a mutual thing. The games are going to drive likely some more sales, HMD sales, and HMD sales are going to drive more game sales. So very interested in finding out what AAA offerings they're going to be, because they've pretty much kept mum on that. All right, guys, that's it for the news today. Now it is time for some gaming. Can't wait. As always, cheers, and definitely catch you on the VR flip side.